Welcome to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're gonna start tuning the rig on Bellacera. Pretty stoked about that. We're gonna be using a Loos Tensioning Gauge, LOOS, for this project. And we'll go over this tool in the vid. So tuning the rig is a two-step project. And in this vid, we're only going to get to the first part of it, which will be tensioning the rig in the slip. The second part of tuning a rig, the fine tuning, is done under sail, and we'll catch up with that in a later vid. So many of the instructional vids or tutorials that I've seen are about tuning a rig in terms of performance. I'd say generally in regards to getting around the buoys faster, racing. But from a voyager's perspective, I feel that to perform at one's best, one's safety is secured and tuned first. We need to feel confident in our boat's ability and preparedness to proceed confidently as the skipper. The old adage, safety first. And this is an ongoing theme and aspect of fitting out a voyaging sailboat that you'll find runs through all of my videos on fitting out yachts. And it's the basis behind most of my protocols for fit out. In other words, it's not about performing. It's about having a seriously strong, robust yacht that you're confident in and know you can count on under any conditions. In racing, the boats sail at the very edge of their gear's strength. They're always pushing to the limit all the parameters of the yacht, including the rig. And for serious ocean racers, I'd say often right up to and of course beyond their breaking point. But for voyagers, we want headroom. We want a safety margin. We want to be overbuilt, and we strive to be over-prepared for anything the ocean can throw at us, as possible as that is. And we don't want to push our boats and our gear to their limits. That's what we're going for when we fit out our yachts for ocean voyaging. And that's what we're going for here at Sunlove Sailing in all the aspects of our refit on Bellacera. So back to the safety aspect of tuning a rig. First and foremost, a poorly tuned rig can lead to catastrophic failure. A poorly tuned rig can lead to catastrophic failure. And that is a much more pertinent reason for a properly tuned rig than the getting from point A to point B quickly or first. We want to get from point A to point B. That's the idea behind a voyaging yacht, and that's the most important thing when we talk about a fit out for a voyaging yacht. And tuning the rig to me is not just about ensuring the proper specifications are met in terms of the correct tensioning of the cable proportionate to their working load or breaking strength, or for the loads on the chain plates or the terminal connections, or the specs for the specific design of the yacht. Because remember, all yachts are specifically designed to sail under the exact parameters of their gear. It's a package that all works together. And exceeding or undervaluing these specifications can again lead to catastrophic failure. But as much to me as, of course, all the above are important, as one tunes the rig, they also need to carefully and continually inspect it. This, to me, is also part of tuning the rig. We must always be taking note of the rig's appearance and condition, even keeping notes in your log of your observations. We need to check around all the terminal connections, whether they're swage fittings, Norseman, stay-lock terminals, and we need to check for rust where the cables enter the fittings, and for hairline cracks in the cables or the fittings. A couple great tools for this: a jeweler's loop, or a really powerful magnifying glass. I have a regular magnifying glass with, in the middle of it, a 10 times more powerful magnifying glass, and it's a great tool for looking for cracks in the rig because you can't see these things with the naked eye. We need to look carefully at the eyes of these terminals where the clevis pins pass through the toggles, checking for wear in the holes to make sure that oblong holes aren't being worn into them. That is if you have that opportunity, because you can't see those connections when the rig or any of the stays are standing. They need to be unattached in order to check for this. So if you end up having the opportunity to, if you end up changing out a stay or something, you have the opportunity to look at the holes in these connections, take advantage of that. We need to inspect the threads of the turnbuckles for wear. Check all the clevis pins for rust, corrosion, and cracks. Check all the cotter pins and split rings for wear or metal fatigue. I think cotter pins and split rings get overlooked a lot. We need to check those as well. We need to check the chain plates. I think the chain plates get overlooked often as well. We think they're these big beefy things that are on the, bolted to the side of the boat, or in my case, they're bolted to the side of the boat on a Krelock 37. But if they're inside, they're more difficult to check. If they're behind furniture or built into the yacht inside of knees where you can't see them, that can make that really difficult. But you can at least check where the stays come down and connect into the chain plates. And we need to check them for all those same things: crack, corrosion, rust. We need to check all the cables for fish hooks and cracks in the wires and corrosion. These are the things that also, to me, are part of tuning the rig. And keeping notes of all your observations is key to knowing the progression of the wear on your rig. So let's have a look at all this stuff that we're talking about while we tune the rig on Bellacera. This is the Loos Tensioning Gauge. There are a number of different models by Loos, two that are not necessarily professional rated, and then a series of professional rated ones, PT1, PT2, PT3. Those are available in either metric or imperial measuring systems. This one is imperial or standard because this boat was rigged in United States, although I am in Mexico. So let's have a look at how we use the Loos Tensioning Gauge. Did I say that right? Here we have a scale for measuring the diameter of the cables. This tool is specifically designed to measure the tension of 1x19 stainless steel cable. We bend it on in between these two knobs right here, and then pull this spring-loaded grip back, and the tool measures the refraction of the cable between the two knobs and the spring-loaded grip at the top. The value of that tension is denoted in a scale at the top, and then we transfer that scale to the gauge's measuring system here. Each numeric value of the scale have a correlating value for the pounds of tension denoted in black and a percentage of the breaking strength denoted in red. And there is a graph here for each corresponding cable dimension. We're going to get started with a little bit of tuning on the rig. Most of the tuning has been done, but I'm still doing some fine, what I call in the slip tuning. We're going to start with this lower aft shroud. I've tensioned the back stays, not a whole lot, but I'm starting to introduce a little bit of aft curve at the top of the mast. And so I'm going to work, because these lower aft shrouds are loose, I'm going to see if I can suck some of that curve and get the mast back straight into column again by putting some more tension on these lower aft shrouds. The one thing that you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is to count the amount of turns that you put on a turnbuckle, half turns. usually, depending on how far around you can spin the wrench, which brings us to the best way to turn a turnbuckle is with a wrench that is more or less the size of the turnbuckle, and you want to turn it right in the middle. You can put your wrench through and turn it like this, but this is not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is at the center of the turnbuckle, where it's at its strongest. The other thing is you have to hold the top of the turnbuckle at the toggle. I'm not sure if you can see that. Otherwise the whole thing might turn, and when you let go of it, it just unravels around because of the wrapping of the cable. So we put in 3 half turns there. Let's go see where the gauge is on the scale, because we started out around 7. Let's see if we inched up on that, and we'll also have a look up the mast to see if we've taken any of that or started to take any of that curse out of the curve. All right, so that worked out really well. I actually ended up doing about 6 half turns, so about 3 full turns to get that up to somewhere right around 13 on the scale on the loose tensioning gauge, and that puts us somewhere right around 14 or 15% of the braking strength of the 1/4 inch 1x19, and that's right about where we want to be for the preload on the rigging. So what we're going to do is go around to all the other stays, the lower shrouds and the cap shroud, and we'll start with the cap shrouds and then go down to the lower shrouds, and as we do that we'll continually go back to the mast and sight up the mast to make sure that we're keeping the mast in column, and any bends or curves that we end up introducing into the column, we'll continue to pull them out as we tighten up the rigging. There is still a slight aft curve from under the spreaders to the top of the mast. A slight curve, which right now I think I'm okay with. So right now, after tensioning the aft lower shrouds, the mast is in perfect column port to starboard. It's straight as an arrow. It looks lovely, and I'm really stoked about that. Over the years, I've seen a number of ways to center the mast when first stepping a mast or tuning the rigging. So we're going to talk about centering the mast right now. Dead center with the plane from stem to stern, straight arriba, straight up. And I think the most well-known way or common way or favorite way of doing it is to use your halyard and make a mark on your halyard and pull it over to a stanchion base on one side and then a stanchion base on the other side, and see how that mark lines up. Stanchion base, your cap rail, any fixed point that we know is going to be pretty much exactly the same on either side of the boat. And pretty much exactly the same, I think, is an operative term here, because for a cruising boat, we're not super concerned that our mast is perfectly centered. That said, we're going to get within a centimeter or two of being perfectly centered, and that's not too bad for a mast that's 39 feet tall. So a couple of the ways that I've seen people do it, other ways that I've seen people center their mast is, let's talk about using the halyard. So the halyard is somewhat stretchy, and so to make a mark and then pull it down, we're counting on the relative strength of our touch on one side and then the other side to pull this mark down to a specific point on the yacht. And of course that's a bit of a non-exact science. Again, we're not really worried about making the mast perfectly centered. But I've seen people hanging a bosun's chair off of the halyard, claiming that the weight is the same for them on either side, and they'll make a mark on the halyard and make a mark on the cap shroud, and then pull that line to both sides. Of course, if the boat has any bit of a list to it, their weight could be a little bit different. If the boat is bouncing at all, their weight is going to be hard to control. Another way that I've seen it done is hanging a weight from the halyard to give an idea of which way the mast is leaning. So if you hang a weight from the halyard, as gravity will line up everything the way it should be, you can tell if your mast is leaning one way or the other by the way the weight hangs, if it's perfectly plumb or it's off to port or starboard. The problem with that is your boat has to be perfectly level in order for that to work. And the only way, I mean, there's no way to make your boat perfectly level, right? It can list either way in the water. Even the slightest little bit list from 39 feet is going to create a rather large difference in that amount of space. In 39 feet, a slightest little list could give you 3 or 4 inches off or more. So that way doesn't really work either. Again, there's no real exact science. The way that I would do it if I had the ability to do it like this, doing this by myself, is I would use a piece of Dyneema or a piece of cable that doesn't stretch at all. And that would give us a relatively exact measurement side to side. The way I do it, and I've done it this way several times, is kind of the standby way. I make a mark on the halyard, I run it down to a stanchion base on one side, I run it down to the stanchion base on the other, and I use my eye a lot as well. And we're getting really, really close with this technique. It's certainly close enough for a cruising yacht. So that said, that's what I did today using my halyard. A note on the halyard, however, I do use the jib halyard, which runs through the center sheave on the top of the mast. So I'm dead centered on the mast with this halyard coming down. We're going to do a quick demonstration of how I did this earlier today. Here I think you can see the mark I made with a Sharpie on the halyard, and we're just going to pull it down to the top of the stanchion bases on either side of the mast and have a look at it. If the mast wasn't centered athwart ships, the procedure would be to loosen or tighten the cap shrouds, either port or starboard, to pull the top of the mast perfectly center athwart ships. So here is our Sharpie mark. It's looking like it's about 3 or 3.5 inches above the stanchion base. Put a little tug on it, and we're lining up right at the top. Pretty tough for that to be an exact science, huh? And let's check the other side. Here's our Sharpie mark. Just putting a very, very slight bit of strain, tension on the halyard here. So it's just about exactly like it was on the other side, just from my eyeball. I can see with that little bit of strain on it, we're about 3 to 3.5 inches above the stanchion base. A little bit of tension, just about the same on the other side, exact science. And we're right there at the top of the stanchion base. The head stay on a sailboat controls the rake of the mast. It is a predetermined length from pin to pin. So from the tang on the top of the mast to the pin on the turnbuckle at the stem, that is a predetermined for any sailboat length that controls the rake of the mast. So the predetermined length of the forestay determines the rake of the mast. It's set before it's installed to the specific length it's supposed to be for that design, and that's that. You attach the backstays and tension the backstays to their proper adjustments, and that sets the tension for the headstay. A very important thing to always make sure of is that the mast has no forward rake or forward curve. It's a very dangerous position for a mast to be under. And this brings us to a column, your mast, under compression. When a column is under compression, that is either being pulled down or pushed down. When a column is under compression, if a buckle is introduced to it, we'll have a failure point. Some of the masts are raked, but they are supported in the way that keeps it from buckling, and some racing masts actually have a little curve in them, but they are built and supported for this type of usage. When we're first doing a preliminary tension on the lower shrouds, forward and aft lower shrouds, all the shrouds really, we're bringing them all into a hand-tight position. The lower shrouds control the curve or support of the middle of the mast in its height. As we're tensioning the lower shrouds, we want to continually be sighting up the mast to make sure we're not coming out of column as we tighten those lowers. The fine tune will determine the final amount of tension that we have on the lowers, and a lot of times the forward lowers will be a little bit more tensioned than the aft lowers because of the stress from the mainsail. A lot of the stress from the mainsail is carried in the center up and down of the mast, and those forward headstays will support the center of the mast against the strain of the mainsail. All of this fine tuning is going to be done under sail. We're still going to be going to the mast and sighting up the mast to make sure things are in column, and that is not just in column forward and aft, but athwartships as well, port and starboard. We want to make sure that the mast is not doing this in either direction, and we want to make sure that it's not leaning back and certainly not forward. Finally, if we're doing a complete rig replacement, which is not really what this video is about, the rig is completely replaced pin to pin. That is, the clevis pin that passes through the toggle on the very bottom of the bottom turnbuckle, where that clevis pin passes through that toggle into the chain plate, that pin is new. And the pin all the way at the very top where the terminal fitting passes through the tang on the mast and that clevis pin goes through, that pin is replaced. Everything should be replaced all the way down. So we've completed a preliminary tune, and I feel pretty good about it. Still have that aft curve in the top of the mast, and I think that I'm gonna try and suck down on the lower aft shrouds next time I get down here, and see if I can't get just a little bit of that curse out of it, and then do the rest do the fine tune under sail. So thanks for tuning in, really appreciate it. If you found any value in this content, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions or there's anything else you'd like some information on. Thanks.